everybody, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Blumira Briefings. As always, I'm joined by a panel of our experts to go through the headlines of the week with some additional context to help you put them in perspective. This week, I'm excited to have joining us for the first time, Amanda. Amanda, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, yay. So my name is Amanda Berlin. I'm the Senior Product Manager of Cybersecurity here at Blumira.
Matt?
Sorry, I'm here as
You're
well.
good. You're good.
I'm Matt Warner. I'm the CEO and founder of Blumira, and I'm excited to be here again.
And I'm Mike Toole, Director of Security and IT for Blumira.
I'm glad to have you back as well, Mike. It's always great to get your perspective on that organizational strategy. As always, to kick us off, we're going to talk about the top threats, suspects, and risks seen on Blumira's platform last week and what we're seeing for trends. So, Matt, what's the latest? What's the haps?
In regard to threats, pretty stable from last week, which is not a big surprise. Lots of people seeing blocked websites on their Sophos, how they're leveraging that to really kind of halt bad content being touched. Same goes for Sentinel-1, really pushing those suspicious threats out. We did see a really significant increase, a 50% increase week over week in the Azure single-factor PowerShell authentication attempts. That is one of the areas that we've continued to monitor more of since Azure has done a lot of changes and how they handle multi-factor, what can authenticate in the single factor. If you're an organization that still allow single-factor authentication or is not necessarily monitoring your PowerShell authentication inside of your Azure M365 environment, it's worth the time, no matter if you're using Blumira or not, to take a look at how your authentication is set up in M365 and really validate that you have strong authentication happening there. We saw a reduction in the risky sign-ins broadly from Azure. So perhaps we're seeing a little less activity from scanners, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on that. Likely just moved away from that tactic for a little bit. We did see an increase in a new top 10 this week, which was the CrowdStrike Critical Alert. For Blumira, we take in alerts from a variety of different tools, one of them being CrowdStrike. And those critical alerts were primarily around two different areas. One was people using the custom IOC side of CrowdStrike, so putting in their own ICs and getting critical alerts associated with that. And on the other side, actually, was some attackers leveraging using sticky keys on the actual system. So something that you only see every once in a while, but it's back. Apparently. So make sure that you are monitoring your endpoints from the standpoint of really deeper into that EDR perspective and looking at how we're seeing attackers living off the land in your environment. Always important. We did see a spike up into internal reconnaissance, which for us is really how are computers touching each other inside of that environment. It's a really good way to look for attacks or just scanning from within that environment. In regard to our suspects, which again are ones that really need validation from that organization, say, did you do this? Pretty stable again over this week. We saw a slight reduction in TeamViewer being used, not a big surprise. TeamViewer, Splashtop, LogMeIn, they all have the same issue for us and all of us in the industry, which is they're great to use ad hoc because they make our lives easier. They're great for the attackers to use because they also make their lives easier. So we always recommend validating what does your organization use. Pick one, make sure that it's not being used inappropriately, make sure the other ones are not being used as well. We saw also a reduction just broadly from the standpoint of batch script execution, which I always love to see. If we could get everyone moving away from that, that would be great. If we can get into either signed PowerShell scripts or something that is a little more secure, is never a bad thing. But otherwise, if you are still using batch scripts, and to say out loud for everyone, validate every batch script run that happens, put in detection filters of batch scripts so you know that work. Do not allow those batch scripts to be in a place that other people can update other than your domain admins or very specific people. Please be careful with your batch scripts. And last but not least, in risk, pretty stable as well, generally speaking. Nothing new entered this week. We saw a slight increase in this is more of a US-centric view, outside US authentication for Google Workspace. So a bit broader from the standpoint of what we're seeing there. But we did see a reduction from the standpoint of, Outlook out exports, application password creation in 365, that kind of stuff. We saw a pretty small increase when it came to people creating potential clear text passwords. So for us, and we recommend doing this broadly, just go into your Google Drive, go into your SharePoint, search your users folders for password, just the title, see what falls out. It's worth validating to make sure that your users are not storing their passwords in a place that is replicated to a bunch of different places, especially in Google Drive. It's worth the check. That tends to be one of our high risk ones. We also had a pretty high week when it came to SMB from public IP. Just generally going to always recommend don't allow SMB to the internet. If you have a DMZ that is connecting into internal stuff via SMB, make sure that you are validating that you control the whole of your DMZ and you are not accidentally opening a hole into that DMZ as well. And that is the totality of this week's threat, risk, suspects.
Thank you, Matt. I love that we're getting an emergent big bad in the narrative of Blumira Briefings, and it's batch scripts. I feel like we just talk about it every week because it just continues to be an issue.
And that password, I've gotten so many good responses on just that and the detection in general, because I know that that's a problem that people try and create password files everywhere. Like the first pen test I ever was a part of, that's what got us. Like one of our one of our net admins had all of his passwords in a password protected Excel file. Yeah.
So secure.
Yeah.
So secure. No, I think that typing password in and seeing what turns up in your Google Workspace is probably going to be like the pulled tip that we put in the description this week.
Seriously.
All right, moving on to critical updates to be aware of. The most critical of the critical, there's an Apache Roller vulnerability with a CVSS score, just a perfect 10, not the kind of perfect that you want, but highest level possible. It enables unauthorized session persistence. So it will allow access to old sessions even after a password change. We'll put the information in the description, CVE 2025-24859. A shout out to Haning Meng, who found and reported the bug. And this is the third. There's been a couple of other major Apache vulnerabilities reported over the last few weeks. One affecting the Parquet Java library, and another affecting Tomcat. 10 on the first, 9.8 on the second. Mitigation, the roller issue has been fixed in 6.1.5. We wanted to make sure to mention this because there's a lot of folks out there that are using Apache infrastructure. We want to make sure to let folks know that this is going on. But Amanda, since we've got an expert in IR planning and tabletop exercise planning with us, how would a team take a story or an announcement like this and start to make a game plan for responding to it or building a tabletop scenario off of it?
Yeah, this is a really good one. So I never had heard of Apache Roller. I guess it's their blogging platform.
So
Java-based blogging platform.
It's like 23 years old, so it's been
Who
around.
doesn't want a Java-based blogging platform? Like that's
Hey, in 2008, people wanted that.
Fast. Very fast.
right. So yeah, after I looked up what it actually was, this is perfect because most places have the softwares out there that are like this, right? Whether you have marketing or if you have HR or finance or anything, they all have random pieces of software that they use for stuff. Pick one. Like if you don't use Apache Roller, just pick one that you have and pretend that it also had this vulnerability, right? Walk through it and be like, oh, like we now have this other blogging platform that we use. What permissions do all of the people that are logged into that have? And walk through what that attack scenario looks like, right? A lot of times those people can be the same ones that approve wire transfers and other financial decisions and are a very high target group of people. So those are always, especially just like you could go as deep on that for a tabletop as you want, or you could just like cursory glance, like, are we getting logs from those devices? Right? Just depends on what you want as your final goal, right? So you can have like the very short tabletop version where you're just cursory glance of do we have logs and detections for something relating to that on those devices? Or you can go all the way down into actually performing like test scenarios using those people's same set of credentials or whatever.
I was going to say the like roller we don't see very often, of course, but Tomcat, for example, is still everywhere.
Yeah.
I There's 72,000 Tomcat instances on the internet today. Like the issues that we've seen, especially from a pen test or attacker perspective with Tomcat, going back to Log4j, going back before that of just like leaving it open and being able to drop applets into it, I think it's a continuous problem, perfectly explained by the fact that Roller came out in 2002. Like I'm sure there are people listening to this who were not alive when Roller was originally written. So it's a unique, like, Apache projects are great, but you have to make sure you are managing them in a very specific way and how you're approaching them. And to Amanda's point, we talked about it in previous ones. I'm sure we'll talk about future ones. Whatever you're exposing has the potential to be attacked. It doesn't really matter what it is. And the more people that expose it, the more likely it is that an attacker will decide it's worth the time.
Yeah. I mean, our EMR was running on Apache Tomcat for a long time.
Yeah. Hey, it was the thing for a long time.
It just runs, right? That's why people
with default creds. I forgot that part.
Amazing.
I love this bug. It's actually kind of common. Like I've hunted this bug a couple times. I found it in places. Um, you know, invalidating session tokens sounds like, oh yeah, that would be easy, but you'll find real quick that there's almost no like browser history that show like this is literally go test. Did it do it? No, it didn't. Okay. Well, I guess it's broken, right? So this is actually a great find. This is the kind of thing that like most scanners wouldn't find. Like somebody actually did the work to look and see, like, hey, is it doing this right? In fact, it's a logic bug. So it's great to like get that off the internet and you too can check and see if it exists in other services. It's really
check your own. If you wrote something, you should check how you invalidate tokens.
Yep. Spin up dev tools real quick. Check your token. It says the date in there and the time. Should be pretty easy to see.
Log out, replay the token.
Yep.
If it works,
yeah,
you can cry a little and then you fix it.
So you're saying you want to build security planning into the application development process? That's just crazy talk.
That's a new concept.
Right? Thanks a lot, Matt. I'm going to go crumble into dust now, thinking about the fact that we have listeners that weren't alive in 2002. So let's just move on. We've got a Fortinet Zero-Day Bug that could lead to arbitrary code execution. This story, at least at the time of our recording, has been claimed by a threat actor, not yet confirmed by Fortinet. It reportedly allows for unauthenticated remote code execution. There's more details in the source link story. The claimed exploit that says they allow full control extraction of data, including FortiOS config files, credentials, 2FA status, and more. There was also a Fortinet advisory released, which we will also link, covering active exploitation of several other known vulnerabilities that are reportedly affecting about 14,000 devices so far. In terms of mitigation for the known vulnerabilities, Fortinet has recommended upgrading to FortiOS 7.62, 7.47, 7.2.11, 7.0.17, or 6.4.16. That's a bingo. No official confirmation or known mitigation yet for the O-Day. And just one more caveat, hasn't been officially confirmed yet by Fortinet. If that happens by the time we post this, we'll include an updated link. So I think like this is a good opportunity to talk about what does mitigation or response look like when there isn't a fix available yet? I mean, this is not a unique situation. What can teams do in that scenario?
It's going to depend a lot, especially with FortiGate, on where the problem is. We've seen a number of issues recently in FortiGate, and this one is varied as well, where it's, the management console's exposed, there's SQL injection, the management console, don't expose the management console. Like those are fairly straightforward. If you have a FortiGate and you're exposing the management console or the management console CLI, you should shut that off for many different reasons. Mostly because, as far as we can tell, it wasn't coded particularly well. So just don't expose it to the internet. Then there's the other side, of course, which is really more related to SLVPN, how people are getting in. I know at least one of the areas here is associated with being able to essentially extract data out of the Fortinet via an SLVPN traversal bug, it looks like. In the grand scheme of it all, with Fortinet and FortiGate, when and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about the CVE stuff, but when the CVE stuff dropped, the first comment I saw on the internet was, well, at least FortiGate won't have to worry about any more updates. So that's kind of where it is right now. We are always big fans of WAFs. We are always big fans of getting something in the middle of those two. Cloudflare is a very cheap and functional WAF, and ensuring that, most of these attacks are still going to get blocked by a WAF. Most of them will still get blocked by something. They are not magical. But having something in front of your FortiGate can be very helpful. And really making sure that you are updating those patches as soon as possible. Some of those CVEs are from 2022. They are not new. But it can also be scary to update a FortiGate and a firewall in general. So we get it. But with the amount of issues that have come through FortiGate, the mitigation really does look like jam a WAF in front of it and cross your fingers, or shut off SSL VPN, which is also fine if you don't need it, up to cross your fingers, hope for the best. So I think it depends a lot on what your VPN strategy is, where you are in your cloud transformation, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Does crossing your fingers and hoping for the best count as defense in depth?
It can, yes.
Okay. So can just unplugging the whole firewall.
Right.
Who needs internet?
Yeah. It was a mistake. Sorry, Mike, you were about to say something actually pertinent.
Yeah, helpful.
No, I mean, I was thinking cross both hands, right?
Yeah, there you go.
At least cover your bases. It's fun because the worst thing is managing a network, and then it sucks even more managing it remotely. So I 100% have the feels on why people expose things, but also we can scope that down a lot, right? My guess is you don't work on the entire internet. You're not traveling around the world. You may even be able to say I have another box that I only connect in through, right? Like putting in strict allow listing for certain IP addresses or ranges, right? Or and yeah, it sucks more. It sucks more than just oh, hey, I'm at home today. I need to get into the firewall because X, Y, and Z, right? But modern times do not allow that. So, like Matt said, put anything in front of it, literally anything that's going to do a cursory looking at the traffic, right, and blocking things. Firewall, WAFs are perfect, or just take it off the internet as much as you can, right? These devices are designed to be on the internet, but it doesn't mean that the internet needs 100% traffic inbound, right? Block as much as you can, block as many admin things, right? Just scope it down to the smallest little hole that you can, because that'll make your life a lot easier, instead of when this maybe does get confirmed and oops, there's a lot of them popped already.
Moral of the story, setting good boundaries is just good self-care. Couple other quick announcements. CISA released 9 ICS advisories. Those are for industrial control systems. We're going to share that advisory in the description. That may affect only some folks that are listening, but typically they're going to be pretty high priority. These ones affected Siemens, Delta Electronics, ABB, and Mitsubishi Electric Systems. So check that out if that is relevant to you. And this is not a critical update, but definitely something to be aware of. The end of life has been announced for Microsoft Exchange 2016 and 19. They will be getting sunsetted in 6 months on October 14th. Which means, they're not going to be receiving updates or security updates after that point. no longer receiving official support. So Microsoft is advising upgrade to Exchange Server Subscription Edition or Exchange Online. So we're mentioning this so that you can start making your plan now. And Amanda, when we were going through prep, you brought up a great point. Let's talk about why people might still have an on-premises Exchange server.
I know the ones that I've heard of are just kind of still afraid of the cloud. And it's a control thing. On-prem Exchange had a lot of capabilities in it that online does not. It's hard to get away from that, especially if you've been doing it for a while. You're like, I can protect this myself, it's fine. But it's one of the biggest ways people get breached sometimes is still having on-prem Exchange because handling your own mail is difficult.
Yeah. Well, and it's not a simple matter of flipping a switch, right? Like you can't just translate the same processes over from an on-premises system to a hosted one.
Retraining and moving all your mailboxes and setting up new everything.
Because this is how we get exposed S3 buckets.
Mm.
So, go ahead, Matt. You have something to add?
More it ends in October 14th. I think we should come back here on October 14th and talk about the extension that will inevitably happen.
Yeah, every time.
Because it will. And then after it gets popped and the extension ends, then they will release a patch because they won't have a choice. So it will be interesting. But for those of you who are looking, you likely don't want Exchange Server Subscription Edition. If you haven't made this move yet, start looking now. Subscription Edition requires you to buy into 2025 server, and it also requires you to generally spend a fair amount of money to something that most of your backup vendors aren't going to support anymore. So just like if you think you're going to be able to do that and not have to do online, it's worth kind of grinning and bearing it and starting to make that change and figuring out how to best secure your environment instead of hoping you can get to like September and be like, we'll just grab that and stand up a new server. They've made it purposely as hard as possible to stay on-prem.
Yeah, I would also say, like, for those that are scared to make the migration, take a look at your current stack, all the things that you have to do to secure that Exchange server and all the work you're putting into it, and just maybe see if it's worth it. Unless you have a crazy, use case that requires on-prem, my experience is you will probably sigh a big giant breath of relief. So,
yes.
Yeah. A quickly developing story. I think I'm averaging updating the notes on this about every 8 hours right now as we're at time of recording. So when I first added it, the announcement had come out that MITRE support for the CVE program was going to be expiring as of today when we're recording on the 16th. They had a contract in place for decades at this point to develop, operate, modernize the CVE program, critical vulnerability, exposure, correct?
Yeah.
Exploit. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, acronym soup. And they did get a temporary extension as of earlier today, announced for the next 11 months. There's some associated chatter around that. The CVE board said that they were announcing the launch of the CVE Foundation. They were conceiving as a nonprofit org aiming to raise funds to take the program independent rather than relying on external funding. And the EU Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA, launched a vulnerability database of their own called the EUVD. So we just talked about last week kind of supplementary or alternative recommendations for staying up to date on new vulnerabilities. We can revisit that, but also, Mike, I know you've got thoughts on this.
Yeah, I was thinking like earlier, there's probably a big chunk of people that don't remember when the National Vulnerability Database wasn't a thing. So like we did have security before this. So if you're curious, like how this affects me, every time you see a CVE, and more notably, like when you go and look and oh, what's the score? Oh, it's a 10. Yeah, I care, right? And then you go and look at the description and all that. That is all effectively orchestrated through a private partnership, private public partnership with the government. Through it won't get into the whole. It's a big giant like noodle mess of different orgs. There's like several hundred orgs at this point that kind of enrich and help out. But essentially, the government contract was pushed to the envelope, is the way I will put it. And then at the last minute, they decided to renew it for a short period. But it sounds to us and most of the internet, which is running on very limited information, that it will be a thing in some capacity. Some people like people will come around it to make sure long term it will be there, so that all you care about and all you need to care about is that there's a number, a score, right, a date. People can disclose things and it gets to the proper channels. That will likely all shake out. But in the meantime, this is the one thing we love in cybersecurity, which is drama. So you feel free to grab your watch, but it long term it should be fine.
Dramatic, but ultimately fine. Good summary. And we'll certainly be revisiting this and updating as we know more. The Certificate Authority Browser Forum, which is a group of certificate authorities or CAs, as well as vendors and browser developers, unanimously voted to reduce the lifespan of SSL TLS certificates over the next 4 years. Currently, the allowed lifespan for certs is 398 days, and the goal is to get it down to 47 days by March of 2029. I just saw your head hang there, Amanda. So the goal, is ultimately to minimize the risk from outdated certs, using deprecated cryptographic algorithms, having prolonged exposure to compromised creds associated. So, we certainly didn't choose to initially implement a insecure process on purpose. Why are folks talking about making this change now? And do we think that, I don't think there's a question whether this will be a headache to manage, but ultimately, do we feel that this is a necessary headache in the support of good security?
It basically makes SSL a tedious effort that everyone will have to do by default and commoditize it across something that is very similar to how we approached it anyways with Let's Encrypt. All it's going to do is result in people being more used to expired certs. Like that's what's going to happen. Like anyone who works at a company that has a person dedicated to this knows that sometimes you just miss things every year because it's easy to forget. And if you have to do it every 47 days, I mean, you're basically doing it every month at that point. So it is an insane amount of additional overhead that is one of those things that'll be very easy for big orgs to solve because they'll put it into a team and then they'll automate it and then it'll be the thing that it is. And likely will result in a whole bunch of new root CAs getting brought up to do it. And then you have everyone else who's just going to be like, I sure hope my Let's Encrypt renews this month or I'm screwed. So it's going to be a really, really weird thing. Like I get the desire to not have deprecated crypto and be able to push people, but I don't think the industry has proven that making people redo something fixes the crypto they use. Like that has never happened. And I'm sure part of this is how do we make sure people are quantum safe looking forward? How do we make sure that they're using the right crypto? But all that's going to happen is people use it SSL less if it gets harder and harder to use.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like this is mostly dictated from the browser forums.
Yeah.
They're all on board, so like get ready for this change because it'll happen unless there's a huge amount of pushback. But there are definitely lots of other devices that use SSL that are not web servers, right? You think about like SSL VPNs. I don't know how that works or how it's going to work. Rotating your SSL VPN cert every every 47 days or whatever. I have a feeling this will result in the people who cannot do this will install their own root certs and run their own PKI, which is a different problem. And also harder.
I
And
was
also,
gonna say, does that cause that's like
Way
yeah,
worse.
arguably worse?
it's a lot of work and it's a lot of like
Is it?
a lot of
Yeah.
risk. It's you're at a zero sum game at that point, right?
Right.
Like
Now there's just a bunch of hacked CAs instead.
Yeah.
I love the idea of getting ahead of quantum decryption and like lowering the time certs are out in the wild.
Sure.
I really hope that the automation is incredibly easy and everyone implements it.
And this is,
Yeah.
I think, just another opportunity to, everyone needs to sign my petition to change the CIA pyramid to the CIAU monolith. In addition to confidentiality, integrity, availability, we need to consider usability. Is it a functional process? If it's a harder than necessary process, people are either going to opt out or try to find ways to work around or subvert it.
Yeah,
And that's kind
exactly.
of the theme that we're talking about here.
Everyone look out for my new root CA with the
Yeah.
new 400-day window for renewal. So get excited.
Fund it. There's been a few stories this week about slop squatting, which is a problem we are increasingly seeing of AI coding assistants hallucinating package names for packages that don't exist. Some recent research found that 5.2% of package suggestions from commercial models didn't exist, and 21.7% from open source or openly available models did not. Of course, the problem with this is, it's easy to, if you say that there's a non-existent package that you need, it then becomes easy for an attacker to say, yeah, that's me, I'm that package, and they can create a malicious package that matches that invented name. Some of these even go so far as to create repos with made up READMEs and even blog posts to promote them, most of them AI generated. There's a series of instructions and videos even that were put up by a threat actor that gave a kind of step-by-step tutorial from discovery of invented packages to exploitation, using AI to mass generate these attacks. So I think this story is interesting because, we have a lot of conversations about security and AI code focused on where and how data is being shared. If it is being shared outside of, the approved corporate borders or potentially even used as training data with some of these open commercial available models that aren't being run privately. This is one example of how we need to take a more holistic view of the security considerations making use of these AI code assistants. Another example, a story that we didn't have time to include this week, found that a certain AI code assistant had 40% higher rates of secret leaks than repos that were not using a assistant. So, what are our kind of thoughts on this? What are some of the other considerations that folks may not be thinking about? How are we going to deal with this kind of slop squatting problem?
I was going to start with saying that I was just really happy, and I'm like, that's probably a bad way to start talking about a problem like this. But because what was it, like maybe 2 years ago, somebody asked me like what my AI predictions were.
Mm.
And it was people are going to use it to copy and paste code and open up a whole bunch of vulnerabilities. So it fits. And I was happy that a prediction actually came
You
true.
have to copy and paste it now. It'll do it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
It works great.
It may even just like hallucinate the code. Like,
Yes.
Yeah. Vibe threats. They're the best.
yeah.
Vibe vector attacks.
Ooh, there you go. Ooh, I like that.
Right? It sounds fancy.
It does.
It's funny. It's like I love AI. I love like all the wins that you get from AI. And I love that like we're speed running a lot of the scenarios where it's very helpful, but we're also speed running back to like Web 2.0 as far as the development side, which is just wild for me. And I definitely appreciate that the democratization of like coding is a thing now, but also like the problems that come with that are the same, but you may not know about it, right?
Yeah.
Some of these, I was reading through this the research, and I believe like a few of the models, it would vary from like some were better than others, right? It would hallucinate fake packages about 20 to 30% of the time, and they were touting like, oh, 20, that's not bad at all. And I was just thinking to myself, like, no, that's terrible. 20% of your packages may be fake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would, it sounds like, oh, well, that's somebody else's problem. Like the industry will fix this. I would definitely think about it in the context of your environment. And if you have people vibe coding right now, right, what are they building? Like, what is your process to look at it more than just ship it off to, because many of these platforms will basically just click next, 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 next. Oh, I deployed it, right? Um, where is the process in the middle there to review stuff? Check your packages, make sure they're normal, right? Like it's not some new package that got flipped up on the internet and has 1 star on GitHub, right? What does it do? Is it critical stuff, right? Like is all very important. And if you have people vibe coding, check your vibe, I guess.
Um,
There you go.
And I think a good gut check for one of these, if you see a package that seems like it's being hallucinated, see if literally anyone else on the internet is talking about it. It's relatively easy to generate and mock up the trappings of a repo. But most folks aren't going to go to the extent of fostering conversations about it in subreddits, right? Like if you're finding that this is unique and only being mentioned here, there's probably some reason to be suspicious.
I was just going to say, just you had mentioned the high rates of secret leaks and kind of the impact of using this. Like the numbers of the secret leaks is somewhere in the range of like 22 million were lost, and at that point, like they aren't secrets. Like you can't lose 22 million secrets and be like, oh, it's a secret. That's just an identity that is broadly accessible at that point. And we see this internally a lot from the standpoint of how like SQL generation has grown in the side of generative AI, and the ability to actually get to the insights that people are looking for is inherently difficult. It has gotten a little better, but it is very much, to Mike's point, one of those situations where unless you know what you are doing, the sheer amount of risk of deploying something is massive. And it's one of those parts of engineering and writing code that, because of the way generative AI works, it seems really easy to skip over because it just does it for you. But anyone who's written any amount of code knows that when you use generative AI to do it, you inevitably run into those weird roadblocks. So you're like, the hell is this thing trying to do right now? You have to take it backwards and restart, which is fine. But if you don't know what's happening, and to Mike's point, if you have engineers that are doing this that are junior, for example, that code needs to be heavily checked, and ideally heavily checked before it's generated like 4,000 lines of code, because then at that point you will not be checking it.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our panel for hopping on and sharing your perspective and expertise. As always, we're going to add links to all the stories that we talked about today, as well as links to the resources and advisories mentioned in the description. For our folks that would prefer audio to visual, we do now have an audio version of Blumira Briefings. You can find it on Apple Music, on Apple Podcasts, rather, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And let us know if there's other topic stories that you want to hear us talk about next time. Get in the comments, let us know, and do all the things, the bell, the subscribing, and the whatnot. You've been on YouTube before, you know what to do. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you here back next week at Friday at 1 p.m. for our next edition of Blumira Briefings. And until next time, stay safe out there, everybody. Bye.